Welcome to another episode of Touring the AFC South. I am your host, Mike Patton, and on this episode, we're going to talk a little Cam Ward, a little bit of extension talk, maybe potential wide receiver, new wide receiver landing in the AFC South, and maybe, just maybe, some discord amongst the refs and the NFL. We're going to get into all that and more on this episode of Touring the AFC South. And like I mentioned previously, we're going to start this episode off with a little talk on Cam Ward. Now, Cam Ward is the quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. For those that weren't aware, they took him number 1 overall last year in the 2025 NFL draft. Now, at the last play of the season, the last game versus Jacksonville, the first drive of the game, he ran and he laid out to get into the end zone. He scored, and in that play, he hurt his shoulder. He has a grade 3 AC sprain on his throwing shoulder. Of course, he has been working out this offseason, but not quite working out in terms of arm strength, arm exercises, throwing, and things like that. Well, recently he was cleared to throw. Of course, with that grade 3 sprain, he did actually avoid having to have surgery, which is a good thing for him because, of course, that would have maybe put him out longer, but or put him, off from his all-season training longer. However, of course, now he's cleared. He will be back out there. He's been doing footwork things, kind of work on, his footwork and things like that with his quarterback coach that he has. Of course, he's been in the area, of course. So he's been actually Cam Ward's been in, pretty much in Nashville for the offseason. So with that being said, of course, now he can do things with his arm and throw. And of course, getting closer and closer to, camps and things like that, which means he can get together with his wide receivers. He can throw. He can, start developing that chemistry and not have to wait to develop that chemistry that usually build over time with of course you got new guys like Wendell Robinson. You got a new tight end from the New York Giants as well. So with him not being injured in terms of having to have surgery and being out a long time, now he can start developing that chemistry and know the tendencies of the wide receivers and tight ends that he's going to be throwing the football to, which will of course build that chemistry that hopefully for the Titans and for Cam Ward and for the overall team will translate into things that happen on the field and translate into explosive plays, which they're looking forward to seeing in this new Tennessee Titans offense led by Brian Daboll. So that'll be interesting to watch. Good news for the Tennessee Titans there. All right, I'm going to flip over to another guy that was talked about, but wasn't talked about necessarily in a great way, especially around the combine. That'd be Mr. Carnell Tate from Ohio State. He had his pro day pretty recently, and in his pro day, of course, people were still talking about the 4.53 40 that he ran. And just to be honest, it's talked about a little bit too much for me, to be honest. And I think that, people can run fast, but you got to be able to play fast. And that's the thing I think that people get caught up in, people running, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, all those different things. I think people get caught up in those different things and forget that, hey, somebody can run fast if they're wearing, t-shirt and whatever, but you also have to remember they got to play fast, especially with pads on. So that's one thing people get caught up in, and, maybe the Al Davis syndrome of, looking at he's just fast. Yeah, that doesn't always work and translate to the football. Like Arbo Reese and Sonny Styles, which are projected probably first round draft picks as well. And of course, you did have Caleb Downs as well. So, had all these guys at Ohio State, showing off for the people that were going out there to check them out, see what they could do. I will say Carnell Tate did not run the 40. Honestly, did I care if he ran the 40 or not? No, I did not care if he ran the 40 or not. But yeah, he did not run the 40 and not running the 40. Of course, he worked on all the other things like the shuttle and all those other things during his time at the pro day for Ohio State. And of course, the biggest thing is with him, if you watch him play, smooth route running, smooth route running. He's not a guy that, he definitely studies the game, studies the routes, things like that. And he plays up to the speed that he is. He doesn't just run fast. Like I mentioned before, plenty of people can run fast, but can they run fast and can they do these different things and play these different ways in terms of that type of speed on the field? Because if you're running fast just to be running fast, you're not accomplishing anything for any team or a quarterback, help any quarterback. You're really not, because you have to know how to, the different intricacies of running routes, the deceleration, exploding out of your cuts, setting up different routes, making those routes all look the same. You got to be able to do those things in terms of, not all routes looking the same per se, but just your takeoff simply being, somewhat the same. That's the biggest thing. Now, as far as, Carnell Tate, the thing with him also that he mentioned the teams that he has visits with. One of those teams mentioned was the Tennessee Titans. Now, plenty looking at number 4 right now for the Tennessee Titans are thinking, it's not going to be Carnell Tate. Really isn't. Or they're looking at, why are they even thinking about him? Why were they talking about Reuben Bain? Or why aren't they thinking about, Arville Reese or David Bailey or Jeremiah Love, which they've had Jeremiah Love. They have a scheduled visit for Reuben Bain. He said that himself. And now Carnell Tate. Of course, haven't heard David Bailey mentioned and visit, but, would I be surprised if they visit with him? No, wouldn't be surprised if they do either, or if they have, and we just don't know it yet. But when it comes to Carnell Tate, you have to always realize one thing. You have to be prepared for every single situation. What I mean by that is it's not guaranteed the Titans are going to pick at 4. And it's not a guarantee the guys they want are going to be at 4, or the guy that they want is going to be at 4. So the biggest thing you need to do is you have to be prepared for every situation. What if someone offers you a incredible trade, gives you a couple first round picks? I'm not, I think that's going to happen now, but could it? Hey, there's always things that can happen. So, say if someone gives you a couple first round picks and they ask you to move down to 10 or 15 or something, I'm just throwing a number out there. You have to be prepared for who's your 15th guy, or who's your guy you want to take at number 10, or this, you have to be prepared for all those different situations and, check all those boxes on different players that you may have interest in at certain different spots in the draft. Because if you don't, then you go into the draft not fully prepared. And when you go into a draft not fully prepared, you have mistakes happen. Like, things can happen, mistake-wise can happen. So, to me, do I think they end up drafting Carnell Tate? No, I personally don't think they end up drafting Carnell Tate. But do you have to be prepared in case maybe, just maybe, you have a trade happen and boom, you pick a little later in the draft? Yeah, you got to be prepared for those scenarios and situations. You may get a great trade offer. So in being that being said, I mean, Carnell Tate's a young wide receiver, an explosive wide receiver. You've seen him take the top off of defenses, and you've seen the lineage of Ohio State wide receivers, most notably right now, Jackson Smith and Jigba. So, I wouldn't be, bothered, or I shouldn't, Titans fans shouldn't really be bothered if they do take a wide receiver. Now, however, I will say, and looking at the wide receiver room, you spent money on Wan'Dale Robinson. You brought back Calvin Ridley on an adjusted contract. You got 2 young guys that are still growing and maturing, and Chim DK and Alec Eilmanor. So to me, do you need another wide receiver in the first round? Jury's out on that one to me. But to me, do you add another wide receiver? Yeah, just not that high. I think you're solid with who you have, but you definitely need to add to the room, of course, obviously. So, that's just my thinking. I think there's other pressing needs before looking at a wide receiver that early. However, like I mentioned before, you gotta be prepared for all the situations. And speaking of situations, of course, the Houston Texans have one that's kind of growing with each day. Of course, you remember a few years back, they drafted CJ Stroud #2, and then they traded up to get Mr. Will Anderson. And that man has been a wrecking machine since he got drafted by the Houston Texans. You cannot deny his talent, his speed, all the things that he is able to do. And of course, eventually will become extension. Well, he is extension eligible now, and eventually will come that extension if he does get it in Houston. Now, I know that's kind of scary talk when it comes to the Houston Texans and one of their young stars, but extension talks, probably have been going on between Will Anderson Jr. and the Houston Texans. I know they want to go ahead and try to lock him up, but of course, they've got to hit on the money and figure out what they want to do. So that's a big thing there as well. Just taking a look at some of his numbers. I mean, just looking to look at it, right? He's got 30 sacks, four forced fumbles. Good gracious, can't even talk right now. He's got 4 forced fumbles. He's got 3 fumble recoveries and 136 tackles over his his first 3 years in the NFL. Now, you look at him, you look at the amount of impact he has on the game, and you look at a guy like a Micah Parsons. Not to say he's Micah Parsons, but he does have a big time effect on the game. So, with the cap going up the way it is, does he kind of look towards that type of money? For those that do not remember, Micah Parsons last offseason signed a 4-year, $188 million deal with $120 million guaranteed. Keep that in mind. Also, keep in mind the cap rose $22 million from 2025 to 2026, and more than likely will rise again in 2027 and in this type of rise as well. So with that being said, the percentages, you look at it, Will Anderson Jr. could be close to the range, if not at the range of a Micah Parsons. Now, right now, Micah Parsons is the highest paid non-QB, and he was the highest paid non-QB in NFL history. Could Will Anderson approach that? Yes, he definitely could approach that because, what is it that people say? If people pay you, hey, you're worth what they pay you. In terms of that amount, they want to pay you that big time amount. Hey, I'm not going to turn it down. And you can't really say that, hey, he's not worth that amount of money. When you look at Micah Parsons had 36 sacks for Parsons, 30 sacks the last 3 years for Will Anderson. So they're kind of close to each other. He's not far away. And he definitely has a huge impact. He is one of the young stars on that team. Danielle Hunter just got an extension, a 1-year extension, like $49 million, big number. But you gotta also remember, next offseason he could be, gone, and they could fully go towards Will Anderson being the guy and bring somebody else in. That's a thought. So with that being said, hey, he could potentially get that type of money, big time money for Will Anderson. I believe he is worth it. I believe he is a guy that can be a leader, not only a leader in your locker room, but on the field. And he's a prime time player. So definitely something to pay attention to. Good thing is he's only in year 3. So it isn't like there's huge amount of pressure, but I can guarantee you this, the sooner that extension gets done, the easier the Houston Texans will breathe in terms of their fans. And also, if they get that extension done earlier, you actually you lock him in before the cap raises again and again and again and again. And keep in mind, again, the cap went up $22 million from 2025 to 2026. So imagine what it's going to do next year and the year after that with all these TV deals, TV rights deals, and all the ways the NFL is making money hand over fist. Think about it. But he's not the only guy that's actually looking for an extension this offseason. Another guy, Travon Walker of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I put extension with a question mark because, you really haven't heard a ton of talk about it. If they are talking about it, they're talking about it double secret wise, So we'll see what happens with that. But for him, He's a year, of course, a year more into his career than Will Anderson Jr. and has less sacks than he does, 27 and a half. He has three forced fumbles, two fumble recoveries, one interception, and 200 tackles. So he's a definitely a guy that's been active, but I will say that Will Anderson Jr. has had even more of an impact than he has. That's not to slight Travon Walker, but that's just to say that, hey, it's just stating the facts of what I've seen. But he is a very much an integral part to that Jacksonville Jaguars defense. Now, has he gotten hurt the last couple of years a few times? Yes, he definitely has done that. Uh, but he has made plays. He's shown he can be a piece who's in need and want to be there. Just this offseason, I would say, they're probably looking at other things right now just because the salary cap is super tight for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, with that being said, of course, that's probably not one of their biggest things to look at right now, but it's something that they're probably paying attention to at some point, trying to lock him up and, as one of their future stars. Now, of course, they did pay Josh Hines Allen a year or two ago. Has he put up spectacular numbers since they locked him up? No, he hasn't put up spectacular numbers, but he's done some things when it comes to, just getting pressures and things like that. But, of course, would they want more production out of him? Yes, they definitely will want more production out of him. But, it is what it is right now. Do I think he gets a deal like Will Anderson Jr.? No, I think his deal will be less than Will Anderson Jr. I just Will Anderson Jr. is just a freak of nature. Not to say Travon Walker isn't, but I would say that Will Anderson Jr. Has been more impactful in his 3 years than Travon Walker has been in his 4. I know some people will probably like, what? But I mean, look at the tape. That's all I got for you. Look at the tape. But do I think he uses Anderson's deal though? If Anderson gets his extension before, Travon Walker gets his, yeah, he's definitely going to use that deal to gauge where he should be in terms of making money and signing his extension in Jacksonville. And then, of course, once that extension happens, when the extension happens, one of the two R's is going to happen more than likely. I would say more than likely it'll be, restructure, but it could be a release as well. Someone, if he gets an extension, somebody gonna, rework their deal or something of that nature. It always happens in the NFL. You get paid, then you either face either a restructure or a release. That is just a part of the game when it comes to being an NFL player. But yeah, they'll have just to give you an update. 2027 all season right now, as it stands, they'll have 44 million in cap space, the Jacksonville Jaguars. But of course, if the cap goes up again, they'll have more space. So say they go up, it goes up 20 some million. They'll have about over $60 million in cap space. Pretty sure they're gonna be all right to figure out that Travon Walker thing. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they will do so. Of course, last thing I want to talk about here when it comes to this episode, gotta talk about the referees. The referees and the NFL, they're at odds right now. They cannot come to an agreement on a deal. They're at an impasse. It seems like nothing right now because we're April right now, or about to be in April, but the season can approach really, really fast. Now, the referees, I know people talk about them. I know people will say, oh man, they make some terrible calls. They do this, they do that. They should be doing this more full time and all those different things. I'm pretty sure some of these referees want to do this full time or are interested in doing it full time. I'm pretty sure the NFL is interested in doing that. But whatever deal or whatever things they want to do, they have to be on the same page. Right now, they are not on the same page in some form or fashion. And, of course, they have talked about, potential replacement referees again. Now, I will tell you, people already get mad at the referees. They already talk about the calls they make and what they could have done and couldn't have done. And, none of us actually have ever been referees, nor do we understand the angles and the things that certain referees officials are watching in the game. That's just truth. However, if you really want to see it get bad, put a replacement referee out there. I mean, we've had referees throwing up two different signals in terms of replacement referees in the Seahawks and Packers game was maybe over 10 plus years ago when they had replacement referees. That had to be one of the most talked about plays for at least a week or two. But it did make the NFL get the real referees back on the field quicker. You notice they weren't on there that next week. So to me, to avoid that type of mistake, to avoid that type of issue, I do think the NFL may have to bend a little bit with these referees because, people can talk about them and talk about the calls they make or miss, things like that. But it's much better than the alternative of things being missed habitually over and over and over and over again. And me, I'm not one to talk about the referees. That's just not my style. That's not what I do. The way I think about it is, hey, you make enough plays, you'll win the game. And bad calls are going to happen. That's the way I look at it. But when it comes to replacement referees, it might be two or three calls, and, and that is not good at all. Or two or more, I would say. That's not good at all for anybody that enjoys watching the game, enjoys playing the game, or enjoys coaching the game. Nope, not good for anyone. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up the show with the Touring the AFC South mailbag. Of course, where I take questions from people that are viewing the show. They can come from anywhere. Of course, you can send them to me on all social medias. I'll give those to you at the end of the show. And of course, I'll take those questions and add them to the next show. But we had one lone question this week that really struck my ire, and I wanted to address it. So here it goes. It's from Ed H. in Auburn, New York. He said, please rank the AFC South teams in terms of the best offseason efforts so far. Well, here's what I got. The first effort I'm going to talk about, that would be the Tennessee Titans. I mean, they're making an effort to change the culture with new head coach. They're bringing in tough physical players like a John Franklin Myers in there. They brought the corners they needed in terms of Alante Taylor, Cordell Flott, Joshua Williams. And they brought in, Wandale Robinson, somebody to be Cam Ward's security blanket. I mean, they've really, attacked the things that, they needed to attack this offseason. Some will say some other things they probably need to attack, but, it's kind of nitpicking at this point. But they did attack a lot of the things that they needed to attack and bring into this team to kind of try to change the culture and change the identity and kind of move forward towards that, kind of tilting that arrow more up towards success. As far as number two on this one, I'll go with the Houston Texans. Now, as far as the Houston Texans, of course, they did a lot of re-signing and things like that or whatever with different people. But, the big one, Reed Blankenship. I do think that was a really, really good signing. Adds to that secondary, gives you a veteran guy back there that's won a Super Bowl, or a young veteran, I should say, that's won the Super Bowl and can actually just be a guy back there to kind of, patrol things, get people where they need to be and all those different things. So that was a really, really good pickup for them. You keep your guys that you have by re-signing them or bringing them back on 1-year deals or restructuring their deals. And then, of course, you potentially got the potential of Tank Dell back. I see him kind of like a free agent as well, bringing back since he hasn't been there for a while. So we'll go with that one. All right, we're going to switch over to the Colts. We're going to call that one the third one. They're trying to bring it all back together again. I'm not. Did I say the Colts, or do I want to go with someone else? Did I say the Colts? I don't know if I'm going to be real. I'm going to put the Colts and the Jaguars kind of my tie because I feel like, for both of their off seasons, I'm like, the Jaguars, of course, losing Travis Etienne and then also losing Devin Lloyd. So, those two gone. Then, you bring in Chris Rodriguez, which I like. They brought him in. They pay Monteric Brown, give him an extension. But just it seems like just they didn't really go for a lot, but which I understand because they don't really have a ton of cap space, or they were kind of running a little tight. So I totally get it. They are who they are and they have what they have. So, it is what it is. And they work within those parameters. And we're pretty quiet this offseason. And as far as the Colts, you're taking a lot of risk bringing back Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has been injured every single season he's been in the NFL. You paid him big money to bring him back. We'll see if he can stay healthy for a full season. You don't have necessarily a backup quarterback. You bring back Alec Pierce, but then you let go of Michael Pittman Jr., which, with the economics of it, you had to do that. So you bring in some corners and some veteran guys as well as the pass rush, and then also the corner and linebacker position, tight end position. It is what it is there. But it's just all in all, I felt kind of meh about both of those. I will say the Chris Rodriguez pickup for the Jaguars. Actually, I do like that one. Sneaky good pick right there, especially if they want to do smash mouth football. So, but yeah, just overall, I'm kind of on both of those. We'll see how things pan out for them this season. And that's the end of the show. I want to thank you all for tuning into this episode of Touring the AFC South. Like I mentioned that before, my name is Mike Patton. I am the host of the show. You can find me on the artist formerly known as Twitter at Mike Patton82. That's MikePatton 82. You can also find me on Blue Sky. Same tag there. You can find me on Instagram and Threads at that's THA, not THE, _general_MP. You can find Touring the AFC South on all listening platforms, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, you name it, we are there. Also, you can find me on the Mike Patton Network, this show, I should say, on the Mike Patton Network, where you can go subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss any episodes at all. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, the Touring the AFC South mailbag. You can send me any question you have at any of those outlets, and I'll be glad to answer it on air. Thank you all again for tuning into this episode of Touring the AFC South, and I greatly appreciate everyone tuning in. Hopefully, stay tuned next week. You'll see what I have going on. I may have a bit of a surprise for you, perhaps. You got to tune in to see what it is, though. All right. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Touring the AFC South. We're out. Peace.